Hey, my friend, let me ask you something, and I want you to be really honest with yourself. Have you ever felt like there's this secret part of you, a shadow you've been taught to hide away, that actually holds the key to your real freedom? I stumbled across this idea from Carl Jung a while back, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. He said, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. And let me tell you, from personal experience, diving into that inner twilight isn't just a casual walk in the park. It's a full-on sacred pilgrimage. It takes a kind of courage you didn't even know you had. But here's the wild part. When you go on that journey, you become someone so deeply, unshakably you, that you become a complete mystery to people who need to control and predict everything. I've learned that for someone who's operating from that broken narcissistic space, the scariest thing isn't getting yelled at. It's not a big, dramatic fight. It's the quiet, steady presence of a person they just can't figure out. A soul they can't get a hook into. A frequency they can't mess with. We're all taught that narcissists are afraid of being exposed, and that's true, but it's deeper than that. They're terrified of the kind of clarity that makes all their games just fall apart. The person who can do that, who can stand in their hurricane and not get blown over, is the one who has walked through their own fire. The one who has faced their own shadow and come out the other side forged, not burned. The universe has a name for this soul, the dark empath. If any of this is starting to make the little hairs on your arms stand up, if your soul is whispering, yes, that's it, then I invite you to acknowledge that feeling right now. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe so we can continue this journey together, and in the comments, just write, I am awakening. Your story matters, and by sharing it, you might just be the lighthouse someone else has been desperately searching for. I bet you can remember a time when you were just an open book, can't you? I sure can. My pages were filled with apologies for things that weren't my fault, and a kind of love that I just gave away to anyone who seemed to need it. Back then, my whole vibe, my whole frequency, was just pure, unfiltered giving. I didn't just wear my heart on my sleeve. I carried it around like a lantern in a storm, offering its warmth to any shivering soul I found, never stopping to ask if they wanted to protect my flame or just use it to light their cigarette before moving on. And let me tell you, that version of me, the one who over-explained everything, said, I'm sorry, 100 times a day, and loved way too hard. I was a magnet for people lost in their own darkness, especially the narcissist. They're drawn to that kind of energy, not because they respect it, but because it's an all-you-can-eat buffet for their own bottomless emptiness. They look at you and they see this powerful, almost godlike being, not someone to cherish, but something to own, to control. I made them feel big and important, because I was reflecting my own soul's light onto them, and for a moment, they thought it was theirs. But then, as it always does, the season changed. The person who I thought was my soulmate, who had put me on this dizzyingly high pedestal, started to slowly, subtly poison the well. It's the classic, heartbreaking trick of the narcissistic bond. First, they shower you with a love so intense it feels like destiny, the love-bombing phase. It feels so real because, deep down, you know you are worthy of that kind of love. But that's just the setup. Soon enough, the affection becomes a weapon, turned on and off to keep you off balance. The blame for their chaos lands squarely on your shoulders. And the gaslighting, oh, the gaslighting. They question your reality so masterfully that you start to feel the solid ground beneath you turn to quicksand. Honestly, it's like they paint this masterpiece of confusion where you're the one apologizing for bleeding, while they're the one holding the knife. And for so long, because I thought it was love, I forgave. I kept forgiving, absorbing their darkness, believing it was my job to fix them, to be their light. Until one day, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was just a quiet, final click inside my soul. A day came when I just didn't. I stopped. In that moment of sacred stillness, everything shifted. His storms of rage still came crashing in, but for the first time, I didn't flinch. He still tried to wrap me up in his webs of guilt, but I felt no urge to explain myself. His lies were as loud as ever, but I no longer felt the need to defend my truth. Of course, He saw this as me becoming cold, as a betrayal. He thought I had turned on him. But that wasn't the truth, not the real divine truth. I didn't become cold. I became conscious. I didn't turn cruel. I became crystal clear. I woke up, and on that day, he met a version of me he couldn't read anymore, a soul whose energy was no longer up for grabs. He met the dark empath. So, what really happens when a soul that feels everything, an empath, finally says, enough? They don't turn into the monsters who hurt them. They don't become cruel. They become sovereign. They become clear. It's like a fracture inside the soul finally heals the gap between the empath who performs to be loved and the empath who simply sees what is true. Remember that line from Jung, people will do anything to avoid facing their own soul. That's the heart of the matter. The narcissist runs from their soul by trying to dominate everyone else. And for a long time, the empath runs from their own needs by trying to rescue everyone else. But the dark empath, they are born when that running stops. They are the ones who have looked their own pain in the eye, who have faced the devastating reality that their beautiful gift of empathy was being used, consumed, and discarded. They have finally turned and faced their own shadow. I had a friend, let's call her Veronica. For the better part of 3 decades, her entire sense of self was built on what she could do for other people. She was the one you called at 3 a.m., the constant lighthouse in everyone else's storm. She was the daughter who swallowed her mother's rage, believing love meant being a silent shock absorber. She was the partner who would apologize for taking up space, making herself smaller so he could feel bigger. Her whole worth was tied to her ability to heal. She was the ultimate therapist friend, the shoulder everyone cried on. She was brilliant at it. But here's the hook, the part she couldn't see for the longest time. That very gift was being used as a weapon against her. Every narcissist she knew had figured out the same painful secret. Veronica would rather break her own heart than risk disappointing someone else. And they used that knowledge. They pushed her boundaries, knowing she would give in. They manufactured crises, knowing she would rush to fix them. They shattered her trust, knowing she would forgive them. It was never love. It was a deep, deep trauma responsive subconscious strategy to keep herself safe by being utterly indispensable. You see, somewhere along the way, Veronica had learned that her own feelings were inconvenient for others. Her tears were too dramatic. Her anger was intimidating. Her needs were selfish. So she learned to dim her own light, to mute her own soul's music. She became a wounded healer, a term Jung used for people who are so busy trying to fix everyone else that they never get around to healing themselves. But here's the thing about wounded healers, and this is a hard truth to swallow. They don't really heal anyone. They just enable the broken to stay broken, while they themselves shatter into smaller and smaller pieces. Veronica's breaking point came on a Tuesday night. It was just a regular day, but it was the kind of day that empties you out. She'd spent hours on the phone with a friend going through a breakup, then wired money she didn't really have to her sister, and then spent another hour listening to her mum complain. By the time she walked through her front door, the silence of her apartment was deafening. She was completely empty, running on fumes. And right on cue, her phone rang. It was Jake, her on and off boyfriend of 3 years, the king of the narcissists in her life. The same Jake who called her too sensitive. The same Jake who'd cheated and somehow made it her fault. The same Jake who vanished when she needed him but demanded her immediate attention when he did. "Veronica, I need you," he whispered, his voice dripping with that fake vulnerability she used to fall for every single time. "I'm going through something awful, and you're the only one who gets me." And in that moment, for the first time ever, she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't the usual panicked urge to rescue. It wasn't that old, familiar need to be needed. It was just clarity. Quiet. Calm. Absolute clarity. She looked at her phone, at his name, and she knew with a bone-deep certainty he wasn't calling because he loved her. He was calling because his emotional gas tank was empty, and he had pulled into a station for a free refill. "I can't do this anymore," she said. Her voice was so quiet, but it was the steadiest it had been in years. The change in his tone was immediate. What do you mean? He snapped, the vulnerability gone, replaced by a cold entitlement. Don't be selfish, Veronica. I really need you. And instead of that tidal wave of guilt she was expecting, she felt something else rise up. Anger. But it wasn't a messy, chaotic anger. It was clean. It was clear. It was protective. I'm not being selfish, she replied. I'm being honest. For 3 years, I've given you pieces of myself, and not once have you asked what I needed. You don't love me, Jake. You love what I do for you. The silence that followed was so loud it felt like an explosion. That night, Veronica didn't break. She awakened. She finally embraced her shadow, her anger, her needs, her right to say no. She realized her empathy wasn't a tool to earn love. It was a compass to detect danger. And when the narcissists in her life came face to face with this new, integrated version of her, they were completely lost. The person who used to beg for their approval was now emotionally unavailable. The gaslighting, the guilt trips, the silent treatment, it was like throwing stones into a still lake. Nothing worked anymore, because the dark empath doesn't react. They simply witness. Have you ever seen someone try to argue with a mirror? That's what it's like. The dark empath has finally understood the life-changing difference between empathy and emotional slavery, between true compassion and self-destruction. They're no longer saving everyone else. They are saving themselves first. And for a narcissist, believe me, there is nothing more terrifying than that. That journey, my friend, is what Jung called individuation. It's the process of becoming truly, fully yourself. It's not about becoming heartless. It's about refusing to let your heart be used as a weapon against you. You see, the dark empath isn't dark because they're cruel. They're dark because they've stopped setting themselves on fire to keep other people warm. They've become what we're all meant to become, discerning. And when this happens, you won't believe the narcissist's next move. They'll tell you, you've changed, you've become cold, you're just like me. But they're wrong. A dark empath doesn't manipulate. They mirror the manipulator's energy back to them. They don't need to seek control, because they've finally found control within themselves. Jake tried everything. He sent flowers with notes about her being too sensitive. He played the victim to their friends. He even started dating a woman who looked a lot like her, posting pictures he knew she'd see. But Veronica just didn't participate. And that, my friend, is what completely broke his mind. He was built for fight or flight. He needed a reaction. His entire sense of power came from creating emotional chaos in others. But he had no playbook for stillness, no strategy for silence. Why? Because the dark empath has learned the ultimate truth. You don't owe anyone a reaction. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your peace. You see, all that time, Jake was just projecting his own inner chaos onto her, needing her to be as desperate and lost as he was. But she had left that battlefield. She saw him not as an enemy to be fought, but as a soul trapped in its own prison, and she was no longer willing to be his cellmate. As Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. She used the irritation to understand her own pattern of self-abandonment. And once she saw it, she could never unsee it. She had finally realized that being abandoned by someone who never really saw you isn't a loss. It's a liberation. Sandra didn't become someone new. She just became herself, without all the distortions. She finally understood that not everyone is worthy of her empathy. She learned that silence can be the most profound act of self-love. That boundaries aren't punishments. They are sacred walls protecting the holiest parts of you. She doesn't rescue anymore. She recognizes. She doesn't fix. She chooses. And she knows, deep in her bones, that you are never, ever obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Her life is different now. The phone doesn't ring as often, but the conversations are real. Her circle is smaller, but it's strong. She started asking herself the one question that changes everything. Is this person capable of loving me the way I love them? And the answers created a beautiful, peaceful life. She found joy in her own company, in the solitude she used to run from. That quiet space, once filled with everyone else's noise, became the place where she could finally hear her own soul. The dark empath's real power is this. They love without losing themselves. They have become living proof that you can be both soft and strong, both deeply caring and fiercely protected. The old Veronica would have felt guilty for changing. The new Veronica, she felt proud. She had finally come home to herself. So, when a narcissist meets a dark empath, what happens? Nothing dramatic. They just drift apart. One needs to consume, and the other is no longer on the menu. If you have been that person, giving everything away, let this be your moment of awakening. Your light was never the problem. Your lack of boundaries was. You don't owe your energy to everyone. The privilege of a lifetime is simply being who you are. The next time someone tries to pull you back into their game, just smile. They are looking for a version of you that no longer exists. And that, my friend, is not cruelty. That is freedom. Take a moment, right now, and just sit with that feeling. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are just ready to come home to yourself.